Hello, everyone. I'm Claire Crawford. I'm a co-facilitator of this week on the online exchange, and I'm talking today to Aarati Gurung, who is the Senior Manager of Program Development and Monitoring for WWF Nepal. As a lot of you will know, the ESSF is based on our experience in WWF of planning for GEF and for GCF programs. Aarati and a team in Nepal recently completed planning for a GEF program in Banki Bardia National Park. And in following the GEF process, they were essentially using the ESSF. So we thought, as a way of getting some great practical experience and understanding of ESSF, we'd hear from Aarati how it's worked for her. So Aarati, thank you very much for agreeing to share your experience with everyone who's joining the online exchange. And the first question... Can I go?
Yeah.
That'll be a fun bit on the film, won't it? Hi, everybody. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, how did you do stakeholder analysis and stakeholder consultations?
Thank you, Claire, first of all, engaging in me, and then I'm happy to share my experience that we had for the GEF. Well, for the GEF, if you know the GEF process, stakeholder engagement is one of the major components of the entire process. So GEF process is a long, lengthy process, and it has this concept phase and full proposal development phase. So this stakeholder engagement process starts very early on. It starts with identifying your primary stakeholders and, like doing that initial assessment. And as you move on to the process, you develop more detailed plan. And at the end of the process, you get a stakeholder engagement plan, which basically guides the entire implementation team, how you engage with different stakeholders. So that, yes.
So you make that sound like a desk-based process. Was it desk-based, or was it something you did with other people?
Oh, well, no, it's definitely not desk or only desk study or a desk-based process, because the stakeholder engagement or the stakeholder in this process is a various level of stakeholders. They are from the community, like vulnerable group, IP, or local community, marginalized group. From that to the local government or the community-based organization institutions, and then state government, from there to federal. And then because the GEF is a government-led, ministry-led project, we have lots of key stakeholders, even in federal. So the ministry are also the stakeholders, the department are the stakeholders. So because there is a various range of stakeholders, our engagement has a multi-pronged ways of doing it. We did have a consultant hired for the going in the field, doing the, all the focus group discussion or the key informant. But we also had various other, like a workshop style engagement, but then also one-to-one key informant kind of a methodology. So this has a multiple layer of engagement processes, which range from the federal, state, local government, NGO, local IP organization to the household level. So I would say it has all different aspects, and it was done in a very different stages with a different multiple methods we use.
Right. And can you just unpack a little bit, if you can, a little bit about how you did the consultation at community level, please?
Yes, so as you know, the area, this is the Banki Bardia complex that we call, it's a part of a thoracic landscape, which is a tiger complex. So we kind of identified based on various aspects. I mean, there are like needs and then issues and everything. So out of many protected area complexes, we identified this area, and then once it was identified, we not only the protected area, but as you can see, there are like a Karnataka corridor, a Khata corridor over here, and then Kamdi corridor over here, and this is basically transboundary. You can see India, so it connects with India. So this complex once was identified, we also identified the very cluster groups, different community groups based on intensity of where the community are, like indigenous people group, or where there's like a socially excluded group. And specifically for this area, the northern side was important for the this whole complex because of the climate refugia. So it was identified, assessed years ago that this area needs to be conserved for this entire complex to be intact. And interestingly, when we were developing the Jeff project, just a couple of years before that, the buffer zone was extended in the Bardia side. And the Banki is a new national park for the doubling the tiger number. So, and then the community here in the northern side actually were very positive, and they actually handed over lots of guns and stuff. And so they were really looking for, you know, like, getting into this, helping make the protected area more for the conservation. So we really knew the community here really need this, some kind of investment. And it doesn't look in this map, but then it is a very remote area. You have to walk like a couple of days. I mean, even myself, I have just been in somewhere here. I haven't been in all area. It's a remote area. So because of that, we identified certain area, and then we did, again, multiple ways. So we had a consultant, the consultant went there, did like lots of group discussion. There was a specific consultant just to do the gender part of it, and there were for the certain community, and then there was another one for the indigenous people group, and then including myself, we also went to a couple of sites, and then we had this consultation in various forms, like I mentioned earlier, focus group discussion, one-to-one, and yeah, those kind of things.
Marvelous. And was there anything you had to do differently in your program because of the consultation? So did that bring about, whether it's at the high level or at community level, did those consultations lead you to think, oh, I've got to slightly replan what I was expecting to do?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the stakeholder identification actually happened really early on, around like in the very beginning. We call it PIF phase, concept note phase. And it was a very small pool of, you know, like stakeholders, especially for the communities and area. But then as we move forward, as we were having this consultation, it expanded, and also, and as we expanded and as we went to the field and consulted our friends, and as we were collecting information, there was a change in, you know, like the strategy, because the issue were different, or some where we went deeper in some strategies. For example, conflict was one of the issue, which otherwise was not considered too deeply in the beginning of the project. Thinking more of anti-poaching and, you know, like that kind of stuff on that side. But then later on we found, okay, conflict was also one of the major issues. So we kind of had, organically, we had this update on strategy, which I think is why we need to do the consultation, stakeholder engagement.
Absolutely, fantastic. That was the summary I was going to say too. So I'm going to move on to a second part of the question, which is around consideration of social impacts like human rights, gender, conflict. You've already mentioned that. How did you ensure that your program plans considered, well, human rights, gender, and I guess in your case, caste issues as well? How were they considered? How did you take all that on board?
As in a process, as Jeff requires a specific gender lens, it does gender lens, and then IP lens, indigenous people lens, right? So we, like I mentioned earlier also, we had a separate consultant or a person who was looking from the gender lens, and a person who was looking from the indigenous people lens. But as we were working through this process, though we had like a separate people doing a separate thing, but then as we were refining our overall plan, or the, you know, like a log frame of the this project and the logic of this project, we did consider everything, all this gender or human rights or IP issues, but then we kind of didn't separate it as in a separate part of the process of the project, but made it in a way that it become a part of our one project. So if you look into our document, it is now integrated kind of a document where you will see these various, you know, like, I can give you one example. Like we have when we develop a community forest action plan,
yes,
it is going to be a climate smart, gender friendly. So that aspect is there. So it's not like add on, but then as a part of a process. So we kind of, I mean, we have tried, but yeah, let's see how it goes. It is going to be launched very soon, so we don't know.
okay, and of course you can adapt your plans as you go through. But I like that sense that you researched all the different issues for different people within the community, and then you can integrate them into the way you do your planning rather than having to have something separate that you're having to refer to. But that integration, that's interesting. And you mentioned a couple of times now that you've used a consultant to help you. Why did you do that? Why did you choose that process rather than your team doing it?
Oh, well, I mean, Jeff is a long process. It's a lot of process-driven method of, like, because it is government. Actually, I mean, as an agency, WWF, its major role is to bring about all the, like various actors in this process. So it would not be possible for like a couple of people in our WWF to do all these kind of a massive information collection. And that is where I think we need to have some kind of external support where you can, give out a little bit of work and then get the information. And so that's one part. Another part is also to, specific knowledge. For example, when we were preparing this project, nobody in the organization were aware of all the safeguard things. So we need to have a specialist to do the IP processes, right? We didn't know. And the same, like, and then lots of, the area is quite vast. And so that's also, it's not possible for like a couple of people. We just like a couple of people here. So we need to have, and then Jeff gives you kind of a substantial money to do all these processes also.
Yes, that is going to be the advantage of Jeff over the WWF ESSF. We're going to have to work out how to fund the processes of doing these well for our landscape programs. There is something else that's coming through in ESSF now, which is about screening. What's your experience of screening, and how has that worked for you guys?
For the Jeff, this project, we kind of, it's not us who did the screening, it's someone else, party who has, we actually did our screening process. So like I mentioned, the safeguard expert who was hired here locally, and also the safeguard team in US office, they kind of processes through. So we were engaged as an responding to, like when they ask questions, we were responding to that. But then it was more of like a third party kind of a screening process that we did. And it also, I mean, it's almost similar to what we have in our WWF system. It follows the similar kind of a standards like human rights and the gender and everything. So like that's.
Okay, so you are already used to doing screening on your own programs anyway, using some of the tools that actually are very similar to that which are in Jeff and in ESSF.
Yeah, I mean, for the Jeff, yes, I mean, we have to follow our Jeff processes, but like for our WWF also, we have tried ourselves, like we even before when we had this WWF like process that we now are working on, we had developed some kind of a checklist for us based on the 6 policies that we have, like a right, conservation and poverty, and all the child, and like all those, and we put that in very for our own good. And but then we would design any project, like we would design and then screen through that process and it a part of our project. So when you look at our action plan, you might not see a separate mitigation plan, but then we know we have run through that. And then if there is a mitigation, it would be a part of our project. So we practiced that for a couple of times. I mean, a couple of last 2 years, 1.5 years. And now I think we have like a formal system in the organization that we can use.
Aarati, your experience is really interesting, and I hope that everybody listening to that has just something to take away. So, guys who are listening, there's a question for you to respond to about how do you think you can incorporate ESSF into your program planning processes. You've heard some experience of how the team in Nepal have done that in applying for the GEF. And Aarati, I just want to thank you very much for giving us time now to talk to us about your experience. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Right, so apart from the blip at the beginning, oops, I should take my headphones off. Apart from the blip at the beginning, I think